Welcome to Books That Spark, a podcast for parents and caregivers celebrating books that help us with everyday discipleship every day, sparking important conversations with our children. And welcome to Everyday Discipleship Every Day, where we discuss discipleship in the 21st century, guided by a Christian worldview. This episode will be for both podcasts, and in January, we will merge these two into one podcast called Sparking Everyday Discipleship. I'm your host, Terrie Hellard-Brown, and today we're talking about hospitality, fellowship, and connection. If you've been reading my blog, you know that we've been doing a series now for quite a few weeks about the attitude of hospitality, and it's called Living a Life of Invitation and accepting that invitation that God has given each of us as believers to fellowship with one another and to make connections with one another. And whether you have the gift of hospitality or not, we're all called to hospitality. I envy those people who have the gift of hospitality. When God has gifted you with that, it's amazing. And you are a blessing to the people around you. And I've had many friends who've had this spiritual gift, and it is above and beyond what the average Christian does. There are so many things that God calls us to, even if it's not our main gifting or our main personality bent or our spiritual gift that He's given us. It may not be our strongest gift, but He's called us to it anyway. And some of those are hospitality, faith, discernment, evangelism, sharing our faith with others. And He's called us all to be disciplers and encouragers. And He's called us all to teach others what He's taught us. These are things that God calls all of us to, and to love one another. But there are those who are gifted beyond just the normal level of these things. Like I was talking about with hospitality. I have a friend who is so gifted in hospitality, and she owned a B&B, which is perfect for her, a bed and breakfast. You would feel like a queen or king if you went to her bed and breakfast. She made you feel so at home and so blessed to be there. It was amazing. She just was gifted that way. I have another friend who's gifted in evangelism. You know, we all share our faith with people, and we tell them the gospel, and we see them come to Christ, hopefully many times. But if not, we're planting seeds, and I'm fine with that. But I swear God would bring people into His life, and in a matter of just like 2 minutes, He could win them to the Lord. I think He just purposefully brought people into His life who were ready to hear the gospel and ready to receive it, because He had such a way of turning every conversation into spiritual conversations. He was so gifted, and it was obvious that it was God's gifting on his life to be able to do that. You can tell when someone is gifted for teaching. We're all called to teach our children what God has taught us, but then you have someone who just can bring everything into an understandable lesson for a child or for the audience that they're teaching. And it's just wonderful to see when someone is gifted that way, but that doesn't let us off the hook from doing what God has called us to do. We just may not be, stellar at it. We may be learning and growing and stumbling a little bit in trying to do it because it's not our main gifting. But I still love it. I still love having people in my home and fellowshipping with them. Like I said, if you've been looking at my blog, you see the posts from Nancy and from me, and we have one coming up from Kathy Lipp. You'll want to watch for that one. We also have a podcast interview with Kathy Lipp coming up soon about hospitality in the holidays. So watch for those and be sure to read those. I think they'll bless you and challenge you and encourage you. I'm also going to have some activities in the most recent blog post on hospitality. We're going to be talking about teaching our kids about hospitality and how to be hospitable. So I made a whole little packet of extra activities, puzzles, lesson plans that you can use. I included things for all ages of kids. So from your 5-year-olds up to your 18-year-olds, activities that you all can do as a family. and learning about hospitality and connection and fellowship and just loving people, being the hands and feet of Jesus. That's really what hospitality is serving each other and blessing each other and being God's hands and feet. So be sure to check that out. It is on my website, which is terriehellard-brown.com. And there are homework assignments for your kids to help them learn about and practice hospitality. So I want you to know that I am writing the articles in these blog posts to myself as much as to anyone else, because, as I said, it's not my main gift. It's something I'm not strong in. I found it really hard after COVID to get back to having people in our home. Before COVID, it was just all the time. We had people over. We had people in our home. We went into other people's homes or we went out together all the time. And it was just normal. Then when COVID shut everything down, we didn't have many people over. And I'm an introvert, so I got real comfortable with that. I know that's not God's will for us. So I just prayed for him to help me. And I'm so thrilled about every other week on Sundays, as much as we can. We have people over for lunch after church at our house, or we meet at a restaurant for lunch after church. And that's been pretty consistent, except when we're out of town. I really love it. I love having people in our home, even though it's not my strongest gift at all. I love having people in our home. The fellowship strengthens us and encourages us and just helps us grow in our faith and in our walk with God. I highly encourage you, even if you're an introvert, even if it exhausts you, to have people around. Plan now and then to have them come into your home or to meet them somewhere. It's really hard as introverts to not want to cancel once you've made an appointment like that. I do understand that. But trust me, if you take part and stick with the commitment, you will be blessed, because this is the way God intended for us to be. Just because we tend to, in our sin nature, which I believe that's really a lot of what we're dealing with all of our personality quirks, is it's just because we live in a fallen world. In a perfect world, we would all just be amicable and loving and kind and generous and expressing God through what we do. Instead, we would never be hermits and want to shut ourselves off from people, because that fellowship is so sweet when it's the right kind of fellowship. So we want to have that and be a part of that. So I encourage you to do that and step out of your comfort zone a little bit if you're not an extrovert, and see how God blesses you. So today, I want to share with you some really wonderful books. And some of these I have just started reading, and so I haven't finished them, but I think they're worth mentioning anyway. They come highly recommended, so I'm not too worried about it, but I want to share them with you. The first thing I want to challenge all of us to do is, after you listen to this, when you go home, if you're out in your car or if you are home right now, go to your living room and dining room and look at it as though you are a guest, or even better, as though you are a child. And think about if your home is welcoming, if it's safe, if, do you feel like you're comfortable there? Do you feel like you're welcomed there? Do you see lots of things that could be broken? So a child would feel uncomfortable because they could break things. And also our attitude about it. When kids are in the house, are we, concerned about them breaking things? Or can they feel at ease in our presence? Some places you go to, some people's homes, you feel like you're afraid to sneeze because something will break or something will get messed up or moved out of place. And we need to help people feel comfortable. I hate to mention it, but Friends. There's so much wrong with Friends, but it was a funny sitcom. But Monica in Friends, she was a perfectionist. Her house was always immaculate. She was a cook, a chef, and she could make wonderful meals. So you would think that her gift is hospitality, but It wasn't really, if you look at it, because it had been scarred by her perfectionism. I think, I mean, I know she's not a real character, don't get me wrong, but when we think of someone like that, it's not that they aren't called to be hospitable. God has gifted them to love cooking and love having a nice house where everything is beautiful and it looks welcoming when you walk in. But then you see her tension that you're going to move something out of its rightful place, or that you're not going to put everything just right, or you might make a stain or something like that. Well, then that kills the hospitality. We want to watch out that our perfectionism doesn't damage what God is trying to do in and through our lives. I talk about this because that's something I learned to deal with early on in my marriage, and I still have to deal with it sometimes. But I believe that perfectionism is a disease. It's a terrible thing that hurts what God is trying to do in our lives and through our lives. If you are one of those people, pray and ask God to help you not to be so overcome with perfectionism, but to try to prepare a home that is a haven for people. It's a safe place for them. It's a comfortable, welcoming place, and they can take a deep breath and relax. They don't have to feel tension and fear. Okay, well, let's get into the books, okay? After you examine how your house looks, what it reflects, and how it makes people feel. Oh, one last thing before we go on to that other part. Your house does not have to be spotless. Yes, it needs to be clean and sanitary where people don't get sick coming to your house. And we don't want bugs everywhere. But it doesn't have to be perfect. If it did, I used to tell people, if you've come to see us, you're welcome. But if you're coming to see a perfect house, you might as well leave now. Might as well leave now, because our house is never perfect. Our house is always imperfect, and it always will be, because I like for people to feel comfortable, and I like to enjoy my time visiting with people instead of keeping everything just so and cleaned up. And it's a blessing to get to spend time with people. We don't want to lose that. So anyway, again, to the perfectionism, we need to nail it to the cross, ask God to help us and deliver us from it. And when we see it popping up again, ask him to help us again, because it does not honor him. He wants to make us perfect through his Holy Spirit. And perfectionism is not perfection. Perfectionism is idolatry and delusion and striving, and none of it is what God wants for us. Okay, enough preaching. Let me get on to the great books that I have to share with you today. The first one is Extraordinary Hospitality for Ordinary Christians. And I just love that title. Isn't that great? Extraordinary Hospitality for Ordinary Christians. It's written by Victoria Doorstock, and it is right up my alley, because that's what I need, is how do I make my house feel comfortable, even though I'm just an ordinary Christian, not gifted with hospitality. I haven't finished reading this book, like I said, but what I have read is really good, and I think you will enjoy checking it out. Now, the next one is a similar title, and it is called Extraordinary Hospitality for Ordinary People. And it's by Carolyn Lacey. So one is for ordinary Christians, one is for ordinary people in the title. You can see the theme I'm kind of going for here. When it's not our gifting, we might need a little bit of help in the area of hospitality. So that book is available as well. I think it can really help us to nourish our hearts as we fellowship with other believers and see God move and do some great things in our lives. Okay, the next one is called Good Works, Hospitality, and Faithful Discipleship. This one is by Keith Wasserman and Christine D. Pohl. This one, I just loved it. I got it because it brings in the discipleship and missions paradigm, the idea that these things are connected. And that's what we've been talking about in our blog posts. All of these things are connected. When we have fellowship When we do life together, we're discipling others. When we open up our homes to those who are in our neighborhoods who may not know Jesus, often we're reaching cross culturally, and that's missions. That's what this book talks about. Good Works Incorporated is actually a ministry in Ohio that has been going for 40 years. So that's kind of what sparked this book. Okay, and then the next one is also by Christine D. Pohl, and it's been around for a long time. This is the 25th anniversary edition of Making Room. We're making room in our time, in our lives, in our hearts for ministry through hospitality. So the subtitle says Recovering Hospitality as a Christian Tradition. This one I think was really great, and I can't wait to finish it. But anyway, like I said, these I haven't finished yet, but what I've read so far, they're really good, and they really challenge us and make us think deeper than just, oh, we want to make things look pretty. It's really looking at the spiritual aspect of hospitality, which I love. Okay, so then one other, well, actually, I have a couple others, about three others I want to share with you. I mentioned Kathy Lipp, and she's going to be on the podcast very soon in December. We actually tried to get her on earlier, and we had technical difficulties, so we're trying again in December. This is her newest book. She has some great books. If you haven't checked out her books, go to her website, and she's got some great books. But this one's called Sabbath Soup: Weekly Menus and Rhythms to Make Space for a Day of Rest. You know, for years, we were busy 7 days a week. I taught school on Saturdays and Sundays. I was doing ministry, and I was like, this is not good. I'm going to burn myself out. I'm going to die young. I'm not doing what God has commanded, which is to take a day of rest. If you know the Jewish tradition, the tradition of the Old Testament, we are to stop work from sunset on Friday night till sunset on Saturday night. That's traditionally the Jewish Sabbath. If that's what you want to do, that's awesome. That's what I did. I would finish school. I went to a school that was Adventist. I mean, I was teaching in a school that was Adventist. So they let us out at noon on Friday so we could get home and get things done before sunset. Then I had church on Saturday night and Sunday morning. So we would get to church for Sunday night and it would be sunset. I had that 24 hours of just rest, and I forced myself to take it as rest. At first it was hard, but once I did, oh my goodness, the change in my life, the ability to handle the stress of the week was amazing, because just having that 24 hours to just do fun things, to spend time with family, to not stress, to sleep if I needed to take a nap if I needed to, and just to rest and pray. I tended to pray a whole lot more when I was taking that rest time. And that's been kind of my pattern, because I do have commitments every day, but I had that 24 hours that I could rest. You'll find out more when we talk to Kathy, so don't miss that episode. Be sure to subscribe so that you can be notified when the episode drops. I think you'll be blessed to hear what all she has to say about Sabbath Soup. It's a wonderful book. I think it's a great Christmas present as well. Okay, then two other books I wanted to share. One is Extending the Table: Recipes and Stories from Afghanistan to Zambia, A to Z. It's got a new edition out. It's by Joetta Hendrick Schlabach, and it is a World Community Cookbook series in the World Community Cookbook. If you wonder why I'm looking over here, I have another screen, and I'm reading the titles from over here since I don't have that book handy. It's in my cookbook cupboard or somewhere. Okay, so Extending the Table: Recipes and Stories from Afghanistan to Zambia, in the spirit of more with less. I know I was missing part of it. In the spirit of more with less. So we're extending our table. We're learning some recipes that we may not be familiar with from other countries. And that's always a good thing to teach our kids, to try new foods and experience foods from other places. And to have those experiences helps to broaden their world. This is a cookbook that can help do that, but it also has stories and um, let me see here. It says extending the table contains stories, proverbs, and recipes from more than 90 countries. Extend your table in the spirit of the More with Less cookbook by experiencing the gratitude, hospitality, and food ways of friends near and far. So I love this book. I've had it for a while now, and I think it's just a great addition to your library to use in your home, and hopefully to open up the door for hospitality with neighbors from other places. Then I have to share one of my favorite books by Carol Brazo, and it's No Ordinary Home. It is out of print. I've had several copies of it now, but I love this book. There are lots of other books about creating family memories, creating a home that reflects God and welcomes people, but this book spoke to me more than any of the others I've read. And I think it's because Carol's style is to share stories, and I can relate to her stories. I really enjoy her stories. She gives you very practical ideas, and I've talked to her and told her how much I love her book. In fact, we translated it into Chinese when we were in Taiwan with her permission, because it was just such a wonderful book, and I wanted our friends to have it. So check it out. You can find copies of it still, and it's just fantastic. Okay, so those are the books I recommend for us. And then I have a few books that I want to recommend for kids. And there are a ton of books I could recommend, but I'm not going to go there. I've narrowed it down to just a few of my favorites. The first one is Little Mole Gives Thanks. And yes, it's a Thanksgiving book, but it has a broader message. It's loosely based on the Luke 15 scripture where Jesus is telling the parable of the man who prepared the feast. And when the food is ready, he tells everybody to come, and they're all like giving excuses for not coming. So he sends his helpers out to bring as many people as they can in, and they do, and there's still room at the table, so they go further out and bring people in. This is a message of the gospel. This is showing that the gospel is open to everyone, because God's own people, for the most part, rejected the message of Christ. Then the message went out to the world. It was always intended to go out to the world, but it just shows a real picture of that, and how for now, all of us are coming to the table, and hopefully the Jewish community as a whole will realize Jesus is the Messiah. That's my prayer. And they will come to Christ. But we get to come to the table now and realize that he is Lord and Savior. So that's the scripture in Luke 14 and what it's talking about, that the gospel is open to everybody. Little Mole Gives Thanks is kind of along the same lines, loosely based on this scripture. And it is just an adorable story. It really shows hospitality. It shows his desire to bless his friends and to enjoy the fellowship he has with them. So I think it's a great little book. A while back, we had a guest on, Ann Ingalls, and she has quite a few really cool books that you can read and enjoy. She has a couple books I wanted to share with you for the purpose of hospitality. Now, granted, when we're teaching hospitality, we're teaching more than manners. It's not just manners, it's more than manners. We want manners, for sure, but we also want to teach that it's ministry, it's service. It's more than just doing the right thing. And, we need to keep in mind that we're not just raising good children who have good manners, who get good grades and make us look good. I mean, that's kind of part of what we try to do because we're just human. But our goal and our mindset needs to be that we are raising adults. We are raising adults who make good citizens, who are trustworthy members of our communities, who can show hospitality and welcome people and minister to people and love people and help people follow Christ as they follow Christ. That's our goal, is to raise responsible adults like that. So we want to go beyond just please and thank you. We want to go beyond just the manners. But We do want to teach our kids manners, and Anne does a great job in these books. They're fun and a little bit funny. I'm going to read an excerpt from one of them. The two I recommend for these purposes are good table manners and being a good guest, so that we can teach our children to have good manners at the table when we have guests over, and that they can be a good guest when they go to someone else's home. This is an excerpt from the Good Table Manners, page 12. It says, a mouthful. It is not polite to talk or chomp with your mouth full. Do not stuff too much in. You can do all of these things when you are at a hot dog eating contest, but not at grandma's table. Bring food from the plate to your mouth. Do not drop your face into your bowl. Leave that move to Rover. And if you have to leave the table to go to the bathroom, place your napkin on your chair. Say, please excuse me. Then she has all these little notes on the side, most of them cultural notes. It says, did you know if you are dining in China, don't eat all the food on your plate. Your host will think you are rude. Leaving a little makes you a good guest. And that's true. They need to know you're full. And if you eat it all, they think you're not full, and they're going to give you more until you're so full you want to pop. And the other thing, like in Singapore, you can even spill a little bit of your rice on the table. Just a little few kernels is a sign that you had so much fun eating your food, it got off your plate a little bit sloppy, and that compliments the chef. So there are things in other countries that are very different. One of the things where she says, don't drop your face to your bowl. Well, in Taiwan, you bring your bowl up to, or in most of Asian countries, Thailand, China, Taiwan, you bring your bowl up to your face and you eat it like this. That is polite, and slurping is welcomed. But in America, we're very different. And I find it much harder to eat here in America because chopsticks are much more efficient than you might think. Bringing your bowl to your face is a godsend. Anyway, this book, in the picture, it shows a little girl and a dog at grandma's table, and the little girl is licking her soup like a dog, and grandma's just in shock. She has a lot of humor in these books, and they're really cute. They're on Kindle Unlimited if you want to go to Amazon and download them for free to your Kindle, or you can buy them, but they're not very expensive. I think they're just really cute and you would enjoy them. I think your kids will laugh and enjoy learning. I mean, it makes learning manners fun instead of drudgery, so that's a good thing. Another book, this book is so bad. It's called Goldie and the Three Hares, Hares, like rabbits. And this is the Goldie from Goldilocks and the Three Bears. And we know she doesn't have a whole lot of manners. She just goes into the bear's house and wrecks their furniture and eats their food. So we shouldn't be surprised that she's not a good guest when she visits the hares. She's a terrible guest, and they just want her to go home. This book can spark so many conversations. It's a little rude, so you might want to preview it first and see if you want to share it. But I think it's funny, and I think your kids would love it. It's opening up those conversations about what is rude, what is unacceptable. So since that's what we're talking about, I think it's okay to bring some of those things up. So it's an opposite of how to be hospitable. Well, no, it's not. The hares are very hospitable to her. They try to meet her needs. They try to make her feel at home, but she just doesn't appreciate any of it. So it has a lot to teach our kids. Okay, and one more picture book that's really fun is Let Me Fix You a Plate, A Tale of Two Kitchens. This is a book about a family that is multilingual, multicultural. And I like books like this because our family is kind of that way too, even though we're all Americans. We're all TCKs except for me. My husband and my kids are all third culture kids and third culture adults. And I guess I'm an adult third culture person. But, we speak all kinds of languages in our home, and my kids know all kinds of languages, and we try all kinds of foods. And my great grandma was Mexican. So when we would go to my family's house, it was always a big Mexican fiesta with Indian fry bread or Native American fry bread, whatever you want to call it. So I understand the difference in the cultures and all of that. Not quite to the extent of this book, which is by Elizabeth Lilly, by the way. But it's fun to look at the different cultures in each home. She looks at her grandma here and her grandma there, and then their home. And what's beautiful about it is even though the food is different, the conversation is different, the languages are different, the hospitality is still there. The fellowship is definitely there. And there's a feeling of acceptance and home and love. So that's why I love this book. She does such a good job of reflecting that. We may not do hospitality exactly the same all the time. We may not remember to put our napkin in our chair when we get up to go to the bathroom from the table, but we can have that acceptance and friendship and love in however we are expressing our hospitality. And this is a really beautiful little book about that. The last one I want to share with you is my own book, A World of Pancakes. And I have a copy right here. I've talked about it before, of course, but in this book, Sam, the main character, he doesn't show a lot of being a good guest or being hospitable or enjoying other cultures or any of that because he's just too focused on what makes him happy. He does learn, if you've read the story, you know, that we can have a better attitude and should have a better attitude. This book opens up some great conversations, and that's why I wanted to mention that here. It opens up conversations about being a good guest, about trying new things, experiencing and appreciating other cultures. Plus, it contains the recipes for the different dishes mentioned in the book, and they're all back here, including my grandma's fry bread. So, this book is available on my website. It's available on Amazon for the ebook, but if you want the hardbound book, it is only available on my website, and you can check that out. Remember, it's terriehellard-brown.com. I really love this book, and I love the story. I worked on it for a long time, and I really feel like God kind of gave me this story because it reflects a lot of what I wanted my children to understand and learn. And it is hard sometimes for kids to want to try new things and to help them understand the importance of that and why it's important. Okay, so these are some of the books I recommend for helping our kids learn about hospitality as far as craft ideas and activities and some pointers on how to talk about hospitality with our kids. You can go to my blog and there's a free download there. So feel free to download that. And also, if you get my book here, there's a section in the back that is notes for parents to help your children experience other cultures. So if you're wanting to reach out to those in your neighborhood and have them over for dinner, there's a lot of pointers here for helping your kids. The download on my website is free, and you can enjoy that together with your kids. There's Bible verses to memorize. There's activities. I have lesson plans, and I did this for ages 5 to 18. So not every activity, of course, is for everybody, but I have some activities for your 5 and 6 and 7-year-olds, and I have some activities for your middle schoolers and high schoolers. There's something for everyone in all of these activities. So that's a free download. Go to my blog posts about the invitation to hospitality and download that. So that will be there. And read the blog posts and see if they encourage you and help you even before you buy the books. We've got quite a few posts that you can read. And like I said, Kathy Lipp will add hers soon, and we'll have that up as well. So we know that we're called to be hospitable. And with all that has happened in the last few years, some of us have struggled with that. We've lost that sense of unity, of family, of community, and have kind of even fallen into, I mean, look at our churches. The attendance for most churches is down still because people haven't come back after COVID and all of the mess. When we don't know what to believe because of the information we're being given, fear can break in, and disunity because some believe this and some believe that. And oh, it's just not good. We need to pray and we need to be faithful to what God has called us to do and trust Him that He's going to work everything out for good. So let's accept the invitation that God has given us to be hospitable, to be connected, to be in fellowship with one another, and help that fellowship to become rich and meaningful and become discipleship as we work together and do life together. He wants us to connect with one another. One thing I haven't mentioned is that science shows and studies have shown that those who are connected to others are healthier, happier, more fulfilled. And those who do not have a connection often, well, those who are in addiction, almost always they have very little connection to others. Many are living a double life. They're not living a real, honest life with their family if they are connected with family. But many of them aren't even connected with family. They're disconnected, which is what has added to the temptation for addiction. And we need to recognize when people are struggling that we need to bring them in and bring them into fellowship. The other thing I wanted to talk about is if you have special needs kids or, kids who have a hard time with social situations and with reading body language and facial expressions, there's something we do that we call task analysis. As teachers, as educators, we often do this, and we help kids to then succeed because we've broken down the task into manageable pieces where they can understand what's going on. Okay, here's an example. So a toddler, every time mom gets on the phone, the toddler comes and mom, 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 and is pulling on her shirt or pulling on her pant leg. Mom, mom, mom. And pretty soon mom is ready to scream because she's trying to have a conversation on the phone and this child keeps interrupting. So rather than explode and get upset, we talk with our child and we say, when mom's on the phone, what do you do? What would be appropriate? You walk them through. If you walk into the room, you look at what mom or dad are doing. And if they're having a conversation or if they're on the phone or if they're writing something down, you wait and you practice that. So mom can pretend she's writing and little Junior waits before he says something. Or if mom's on the phone, he waits. Unless he's choking on something, or you're bleeding to death. So there are exceptions. But if mom and dad are talking or on the phone or writing down something or anything like that, you need to give them a second. And you just stand there. You just stand beside them and just wait patiently. Then when they're finished or when they say, what do you need? Or, hey, what's up? Then you can tell them what's going on. So that's taking that whole situation, breaking it down into steps where the child can see what's going on, interpret that correctly, and act appropriately. It just helps everything be so much better. We need to do that even with our older kids. If we're teaching them hospitality, what do we do when the doorbell rings? We teach them as soon as the doorbell rings, whatever you're doing, within reason, sit it down and go answer the door. If you're in the middle of a video game, first of all, I always tell my kids, people are coming, so that they're not in the middle of a video game, hopefully. Then when people get here, they don't have to be like, my game. So let them know when people are coming. I always try to let them know. If you have a kid with ADD, ADHD, Asperger's, autism, any of those things, they don't do well with change. You need to give them as much warning as you can that people are coming over. My kids love having people over, but they don't like being surprised. So let them know someone's coming. When the doorbell rings, if they're old enough to answer the door, they answer the door, and teach them how to welcome someone into the house, offer something to drink, show them where to sit, and then sit with them, talk with them. And if your kids are like mine, they're not comfortable with that, but you teach them how to just listen to the other person. How are things going? What's up? Or whatever. And talk together and help them to learn how to have these kinds of conversations. So we task analyze and break it down into manageable pieces so that our children can be successful. That's the whole goal. It's helping them to be successful in being hospitable, in managing the social awkwardness and the uncomfortable situations so that they're not so uncomfortable for them. Then you can have that fellowship and that connection that we've been talking about. We have to break those down for kiddos like that. If you have any questions about that, please post your questions or comments on the blog post at terriehellard-brown.com. We answer every question and respond to every comment, and we'd love to hear from you. What have you found to really work with your kiddos who have a hard time reading body language and facial expression? How do you help them be hospitable? And also help your kids think through. That's what the blog post is about, is how can we help our kids think through what they want to do and what they can do to help people feel at home in our homes. Remember, starting in January, Books That Spark and Everyday Discipleship Every Day will be one podcast sparking everyday discipleship. So be sure to watch for that. If you subscribe, I don't know if we're going to be able to make it connect over. You may have to subscribe again, but they will be on all of the different venues that they're on now, and it will have the connections from my website. If ever you need to find out anything I'm doing, my books or my art or anything, go to my website. Everything pretty much links from there. And if you don't find what you're looking for, hit the contact button and write me an email, and we will get back to you as soon as we can. So anything you need from my blog, my podcast, or my books and my art, you can find from my website. That's the safe way to always find what you're needing. Okay, so that will happen in the middle of January. We'll have the one podcast I'm really excited about. I hope you'll enjoy it. We pray that you feel empowered to walk by faith and to embrace everyday discipleship every day with the children in your life.